Jendra Jarnagin. It's Mike Messier and the Messier Moment. First of all, I want to thank you so much for being here. You look fantastic.
Thank you. It's a film premiere, you know, you got to dress up.
And as a DP, director of photography, you know what looks good. And so let's talk about the craft, the skill. What got you interested in being a DP, a director of photography, a cinematographer?
I grew up in Cranston, Rhode Island, and I got invited to I went to Bain Junior High, and I always tell this story, but never with the local Rhode Island details.
Right.
And I got invited to a gifted and talented program, extracurricular program that happened to be at Cox Cable. And I went there, and there's like a TV studio. I was 12 years old, and I was like, oh, I want to make movies. And I kept doing it and was good at it and had a mentor there, Mark Cavanaugh. I've lost track of him. There's too many people named Mark Cavanaugh. If anyone knows Mark Cavanaugh from Cox Cable in 1986, I would love to reconnect with him and let him know the impact that he had on my life. But I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker from the age of 12, and it took from like 12 to 15 to learn who did what, to realize I don't want to be a director, and I wanted to be a director of photography. So.
It's such an essential part of filmmaking because, like you said, the visual style of the DP, helping the director, the DP's job is to help bring those visions in the director's head to life. Sometimes a director, like I direct independent stuff myself, you have these crazy ideas, but you don't know how to do them as a director, and the DP...
And you don't need to.
Right.
You don't need to know how to do them. That's the DP's job. You just need to know how to communicate it to your DP, and then your DP can pitch you ideas on how to achieve what you're trying to say.
What are some of your visual influences? Do you like sculpture artists? Do you like visual painters? Do you like other filmmakers? What inspires you?
I love going to museums. I mean, of course, I love watching movies, but when I watch a movie, I just want to get absorbed in the story, and I don't want to like study or pick apart the lighting unless it's a second or third viewing, or if it's a film that was mentioned as a visual reference by the director, like, oh, we want, like for A Bet's a Bet, I'm still used to calling it A Bet's a Bet, we were referencing Crazy Stupid Love, was like a tone and a mood and a color palette and a treatment of the characters visually that we really liked. But unless I'm watching a movie for that reason, I don't like to pick apart a movie visually, whereas a painting or still photograph, it's like so much is concentrated in that singular image that you can really, especially a painting, because I mean, if photography is still grounded in reality, like you're capturing something that concretely exists for the most part, unless you're, you know, staging it or whatnot. I mean, you're still very creative, but a painting, you can skew physics. You can make the light be totally different than it really would be because of how it is going to express something in a way that you look at a painting and you buy it, or you don't buy it, like Magritte, and you're like, what's going on here? It's like sunny, but the sky's dark, and you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I really like paint. I don't know how to paint, but I love going to museums and traveling. Actually, travel is the thing that inspires me more than any visual art form. It's the experiences.
I just was in Mystic, Connecticut for a few days, so a little mention of Mystic is a nice place. But where have you been recently or in your life that inspired you as far as a traveler, as far as vacations or work vacations that you've been to?
I've been to 25 countries. I had a year where I was doing documentaries back to back, where I was in 10 countries in 1 year. The most exotic place I've ever been is Papua New Guinea. And when people ask me, oh, what's the most interesting place you've been? I said, well, it depends. Why are you asking? Are you asking about somewhere that you would potentially like to go for yourself someday, or just as a point of conversation of like what's interesting to talk about? Because if you just want to know what's interesting to talk about, it's Papua New Guinea, but you can't actually go there. Like the only people who get to go there are, you know, missionaries, miners, and documentarians and anthropologists, pretty much. But Cambodia was a place that I traveled to on my own for vacation, which blew my mind. Just a really inspiring place, and the spirit of the people to just realize that it's only been one generation since the genocide, and how they've recovered, and how they've recovered spiritually as a culture, that they are so warm and open and not jaded and painful, and not licking, but their wounds, they've overcome such a recent tragedy in a really beautiful way. Yeah, it's this really amazing place.
I have a feeling you're going to be writing a book someday about film, because you just seem like this knowledge is just popping out of your head, and it's awesome.
Thank you. I do a lot of interviews.
That's good. And do you have any inspirations as far as cinematographers that you grew up, or directors, but especially cinematographers, because this is an underlooked, for the common person who watches a film, they think actors probably first, and then directors, and maybe a writer like Stephen King, but the cinematographer, the editor, the score, these are really big-time key elements, huge. So did you have any influences as far as other cinematographers that you like, their style?
Growing up, Conrad Hall's work always affected me very strongly in a way that didn't draw you out of the movie, but still affected you in a really powerful way that you didn't really notice, you didn't feel it happening.
What films did you?
Like American Beauty.
Yes.
Was an example of that. More recent, Wally Pfister is one of my favorite cinematographers, and I really like Rodrigo Prieto's work and Claudia Miranda. Yeah, I mean, Roger Deakins, everyone loves Roger Deakins. I mean, he's like the cinematographer's cinematographer, or the filmmaker's cinematographer.
Right. And some of these names are just powerful, epic people in the film world. And as you show me your business card, to me this is impressive, because I do subscribe to Movie Maker magazine. And you want to tell us about your business card logo a little bit, because I find that fascinating. Okay,
sure. You're going to cut it into the interview.
Yeah. We'll do that.
So I had the idea. I wanted a new business card a bunch of years ago, and I had a friend who was a photographer who was really good at branding and had a great business card. And I was like, every time I want a new business card and I run out of time and I end up ordering the same old boring one, and it's like I really need to make a point to create a better business card. And so we're like, all right, let's brainstorm. And she started asking me branding questions, like what's unique about you, or what do you want to express in your marketing materials, or what do you want people to know about you? And I started, speaking in those terms, and I said, I had seen a really great image of a female cinematographer that was really striking and memorable. She was in an amazing couture dress on the salt flats at sunset, and it was so beautiful, because you don't usually see a woman next to a camera like that.
Right.
But you weren't sure that she was a DP. She was, because I knew her, but it looked like she could have just been a professional model, because she was so attractive and her dress was so glamorous. And I was like, I don't want to be mistaken for eye candy.
Right.
I want to make sure that people see me commanding my tools, and I was like, I want something that expresses girl power, like Rosie the Riveter.
Yes.
So I use that as an example of what,
Right.
and then as soon as I said it, I was like, oh my God. Because I was like Rosie the Riveter. And then I was like, I could just hold a camera and just
Right.
be Rosie the Riveter holding a camera. That would be awesome. And that was it. And so I had the headscarf made at a tailor. I ordered the fabric online, and I had
Right.
a shirt. I picked out the right shirt, and I had the union logo embroidered on the shirt, and I did a trial run with the hair and makeup art. It was people are like, oh, that's you? Oh, you photoshopped your face? And I was like, no, that was a photo shoot. That was a produced plan. I worked out in order for my biceps
Nice.
to be bigger. It was a very involved, but
So
it
this
served
is
me
you
very well.
on the-
That is me, yes.
and this-
And it's a photograph. It's not an illustration.
That's beautiful. And that made it to Movie Maker magazine on the cover, I believe.
Yeah, so I was communicating with Movie Maker about an idea. I'd met the editors at Sundance, and they wanted to do an article about women DPs. But we sort of had a brainstorming session, or we were planning to sit down in LA to be like, what angle can we take on this that's not complaining
Right.
about oh, there's not enough women DPs. But there's more a spotlight on women DPs. So we were communicating, and that image, being my business card, is in my signature of my email. And so they had seen it, and they're like, we're wondering, can we use your image for our activism and film issue? It would be, we were talking about oh, maybe we want Uncle Sam, we want you
Right.
with a film slant. And they were like, that would be perfect. And I said, oh, you should put it on the cover. And they were like, yeah, usually we do a person who's in a film that's being released, and they've got PR people that are all tied in. And she's like, but I'll pitch the idea. And then I get an email a few weeks later, we're going to put you on the cover.
That's
So-
got to feel fantastic. And I have this magazine, and I read the article, and maybe geeking out a little film guy stuff, but I mean, Movie Maker magazine is a top-notch magazine in the independent movie circles. So congratulations. That's just epic.
I would love to talk about Rhode Island, the Rhode Island connection of how I came to shoot this movie and what it means to me to have a movie showing at the Showcase Cinema, where I grew up every weekend going to films here with all my teenage friends. And like here I have a movie at Showcase Cinema Warwick is like a really awesome experience.
That's awesome. I actually worked at this theater very briefly, and growing up and coming to this movie theater, what are some of the movies that you enjoyed, whether they inspired you directly or just films that you liked as a youngster?
I can't even remember any in particular because I would just see everything that I could all the time. So I would just pick, I remember trying to see Purple Rain. It's like, can we get in? It was like rated R, and right. Can we sneak in? Will they let us in? Will we need our parents with us? that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I also saw a lot of movies at the Park Cinema in Cranston, but it was mostly here. I can't. It's such a blur. Like I don't have any specific moments of seeing films here so much as just coming here all the time, being in the lobby, flirting with boys, playing the video game with the driver, like the pole position or something, the driving video game. I'm talking like, 1992 or 1990. I graduated high school in 92. So it's like now this whole Vinny Pazienza thing, it's like, we were hearing about Vinny Paz, like he was like local hero, hometown hero, like all throughout my teenage years. So it's pretty cool. I'm not directly involved in that movie, but to be involved in a Verdi production, and now that Verdi Productions its next film, and I'm sitting at the table with him tonight signing posters, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. What's next for you? What's on the docket for you?
I'm shooting a film. The next thing I know that I'm doing, being a freelancer, it's like hit or miss. Is in March is a film called Blind. It's a romantic drama about a blind writer who falls in love with a woman who's come in to do community service, like reading with him. And they kind of make each other feel alive again and start a romance.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
For the young, and not, because we did talk about the women in film, the women DPs, for young women out there especially, and it's for everybody, but for young women who say, gee, this film industry is great, but how do I break in? How do they break in? What do they do?
I went to NYU undergrad film school, and some people are like, oh, do you really need film school? And now you don't as much anymore because the tools are available that you can find local filmmakers wherever you are that you can connect with and just, start doing stuff and learn by doing. But I really value my film school education. I was I always knew I wanted to be a DP, so I was a gaffer and a lighting technician. As a side job as I was working my way up the ladder to get to the point of being able to make a living as a DP. And even though all the stuff I learned on sets, like I was learning the how, but I was learning crew dynamics, but I wasn't learning the why the way that I did in my education. So having that basis and then going and seeing it done, like I could apply like, oh, we're doing this because of this mood, or the director's covering this scene in this way. Like I understood it in a way because of my educational background I really valued. But, film school is expensive. One of my advice about film school is don't go into debt to such a degree that you're actually going to limit your employment options, because you're going to come out with so much debt that you actually can't work freelance because you need to take a job to pay the bills, and then you never get to be a filmmaker because you have to pay your film school debts. So that's one piece of advice I have about film.
It is tough, and I'm going to suggest in 2 or 3 years or 5 years, read your book, because I'm sure you're going to write one about film and being a cinematographer and everything that you've established for your career, and as it blossoms and grows. It's very impressive.
Thank you.
So, Jendra, tell us more about working with Jonathan Silverman on The Opposite Sex. What was it like working with Jonathan, who's got so much experience?
Jonathan and his wife Jennifer were co-directors. Even though Jonathan is the only one who made it to the premiere, can't forget, like, Jennifer is just as key a role as he was. And I was a little worried about working with co-directors. I was like, who am I going to communicate about what, and are they going to be on the same page, or am I going to get mixed signals? But I'd worked with co-directors before, and I'd worked with the husband and wife co-directing team recently. So I actually gave them some tips about certain things to make sure that they address amongst themselves in advance before the film started, and they're like, oh yeah, we hadn't thought about that. But they did tell us, we've talked it through, we've prepped it amongst ourselves. We feel like we already are a unified front at the point that I was being brought on in the project in terms of what they would communicate with me and their taste and everything, and I found that very much to be true. But yeah, I was very excited when I found out that they were directing it in terms of their level of experience, and Jonathan had already directed the National Lampoon movies, so he had some directing experience, and I found Jennifer to be a great comedy director. She had great visual ideas, and was always really funny and always on the ball, and yeah, it was a great experience.
And the look of the film, what inspired the look? I know you talked about another film, but what inspired the look of the film, and what was your approach to creating the mood for the piece?
Jennifer had done a Pinterest board of some frame grabs of some films that she'd liked the looks of, and the main word that they used is the tone that they wanted to create for the film was warm and colorful. So basically being a raunchy comedy, but also, sort of, I mean, I don't want to call it a romantic comedy because that makes it sound like it's a different kind of tone of a film than it is. But you could say technically, it is a comedy that's a romantic comedy. That, of course, we wanted the leads to look beautiful and the world, not a rough and edgy, handheld, shaky, like medical drama type of tone, but a fun, lighthearted, comedic, flattering type of look. So that's more or less what I'm known for. So when they saw my reel, they're like, okay, this, she's good at this. She's good. We know what we want, and she's good at what we want. So let's work together.
And Jendra, you talk about your reel, and I was going to ask you, what are some of the other films you've worked on from on your career up? What are some of the key moments of your career, other films that you liked working on?
I shot a film. My first theatrical release was called Molly's Theory of Relativity, and that was for a director named Jeff Lipsky, and that was his 5th feature film. So that was fun to work with a director who had, made more, because usually as an independent, working in independent films, you work with directors who've only made one, often it's their first movie. Maybe they've made another movie before, but you learn so much with each film that you do. So to work with a director who'd already made 4 feature films was a great experience. And that played at we had a screening at the Avon. That's actually how I got The Opposite Sex. So I posted on Facebook my first theatrically released movie, showing in New York and LA. And my high school theater teacher, Joe Wallace from Cranston East, saw it and said, hey, are you showing it in Providence? And I said, no, I don't think there are any plans to. And he said, well, if you want to do a screening here, I could host a screening for you. And I said, oh, I'll pitch that idea to the director. The director is also a distributor as his day job. So I was like, do you want to go do a special screening in Providence? My theater teacher will organize it. And he's like, oh yeah, sure, why not? I was about to tell him what art house cinemas were in Providence, but he's very familiar. He's like, oh, the Avon just installed their DCP server. I'll call up so-and-so and we'll arrange a screening. So he and I came to town, did a Q&A, and I put on Facebook, I invited everyone I knew in the Rhode Island area that I had a screening in Rhode Island. And Jonathan Silverman, who is the second AD on The Opposite Sex, I had worked with him before, and he's like, oh, I can't make your screening. It's like day 2 of principal photography for this film that I'm shooting, which was Army of the Damned, which was a Verdi production that had been shooting earlier. And he's like, you should come by set while you're in town. And I was like, okay. And I was tight on time. It was like 9 p.m. I was eating dinner at my dad's house. I'm thinking, oh, I'm not going to make it by there. And I was like, let me just see. And Jonathan texts me the address. And I look it up, and it is like 2 minutes from my dad's house. So I was like, all right, I'll just go over there. I'll stay for a few minutes, say hi, make an appearance. So I get there, and we call him Sherm, Jonathan Silverman, introduces me to Chad Verdi. And I didn't know at the time that Jonathan had already told Chad about me and who I was, and that I was from Rhode Island, but I lived in New York, and this is my experience level. And so when I got there, Chad knew all about me, and he's like, oh, I have a movie coming up, that's a budget level that seems like you know, that it's like right up your alley, and can I see your stuff? Do you have a reel? And I was like, yeah, I'll send it to you tomorrow. And then like the following day, I get an email from Jonathan Silverman saying, you know, I'm directing this movie with Chad Verdi, and he speaks very highly of you, and we looked at your site, and we'd like to talk, and we, you know, basically had a phone interview with Jonathan. Jennifer was shooting in another country. We did set up a call for her to get her involved as well, to see, you know, oh, is this a good fit? Do we communicate well? And I was already really excited about it, and so that's how I got the job.
That's got to feel great. And what you said with the emails and the introduction, it's really a hybrid these days of networking between in-person meetings, word of mouth, personal references, and the Skype, the Facebook, everything you mentioned in one story. It all goes together these days.
Yeah, and that the mood board for the film was like done on Pinterest. Like I wasn't even on Pinterest yet. I had to sign up for a Pinterest account to go look at the references that Jennifer had already put together.
I want to thank you so much for being on the Messier Moment. You've been a great guest and so informative and educational, and exciting to have you here on the Messier Moment. I want to thank you, Jendra.
Thanks for having me.
Messier Moment.